Oh, I'm so sorry. I hope it comes out. I don't know if we need to spray shot or something. Made it big.
Oh, you are fired?
זהו, פיטרו אותה. And we'll take it off your paycheck.
Right.
Yeah.
אמרת כמו ישראלית טובה.
Oh, yeah.
כמו ישראלית טובה. מורל מה המשכורת שלו?
How about that weather?
הופה. וואו. זה מהדלג'ן. מה קרה? זה בסדר?
זה גשם בחוץ מרן. I'm sorry, my hand got dirty. I'll wash
We
it.
said mine are clean.
מה בשביל?
גם את הסמוך.
גם את הסמוך.
You want to try? This is with ground beef.
Amazing. You found us online?
We didn't have creative.
You check for
I'm doing Sunny Gilling.
yeah?
Did you go live?
Find on it. Yeah, it's on.
Okay, yes.
Okay.
It looks amazing. Send right there. It smells
Water
like
heater still making crazy noises.
Can expect it.
לא, אנחנו מפה היום.
Close that door.
לא, מאמינה שאנחנו... לא בס? No, it's Lezano.
No, I'm good, I'm good.
You're sure?
Yeah.
Okay, so what are we up to? Parak 9. We're up to Parak 9, but I figured probably a good time for a little brief review to catch up to where we're up to. Especially because we have some new participants, got to get you up to speed. So try to do 8 chapters briefly, give you a review of the last 8 chapters.
8 chapters to 3 months?
Yeah, something like that. If I do it in 20 minutes, you're going to wonder why we had to take 4 months. Okay, so the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, started with the question of what exactly is the Gemara says that before a person is born, they're made to swear that they'll be a tzaddik and not a rasha. Normally, we understand the word tzaddik to mean a saint, a righteous person, and a rasha to mean a wicked person. Rasha is a sinner, a wicked person. But the Alter Rebbe in Tanya develops this thesis that those are borrowed terms. When the Talmud discusses tzaddik and rasha with regards to reward and punishment, a tzaddik is somebody who is primarily a good person. More than 50% of their deeds were good. A rasha is someone who more than 50% of their deeds were wicked. And then there's the average guy, the Beinoni, the middle one. And the Alter Rebbe says that that is the borrowed term, but the idea that a tzaddik is a saint needs definition, and the idea that the rasha is a wicked person needs explanation, because as he develops the idea, it seems pretty clear that we are all in the category of rasha. So what does that mean? What does it mean that we're all wicked? It's not supposed to be a downer, not supposed to be discouraging, but it's supposed to be realistic in that we're trying to reach the level of Beinoni And the tzaddik is, those very, very few special people who God grants that special soul that makes them the tzaddik. They're, the prophets and the judges, those. But our project in life is to go from being Rasha to Benoni. And that's basically the subject of the entire 53 chapters of Tanya. How do you go from being the Rasha to the Benoni? So that's a general overview of what we're going to study. So in chapter 1, the way the Alter Rebbe does it is he introduces us to ourselves. He helps us get to know ourselves and understand ourselves. How do we work? Why do we have the internal conflicts that we have? How do you deal with those internal conflicts, etc.? So he starts by telling us about our inner workings. We have two souls, a godly soul and an animal soul. The animal soul comes into the person right at the beginning of life. The godly soul takes time to develop all the way till the bar or bat mitzvah. The animal soul is where all of our negative traits come from, and the godly soul wants only what's good and godly. That's essentially chapter 1. Chapter 2 starts to define the souls, explain what exactly the souls are and how they work. So in chapter 2 he says, the godly soul is made up of 10 bechinot, 10 attributes. Just like the divine and creation is through the 10 divine sefirot, meaning attributes, for lack of a better word, 3 elements of intellect and 7 elements of, you could call them emotion. That's why the soul, likewise, is made up of 3 elements of intellect and 7 emotional attributes. And you have to forgive the fact that whenever you use translation, it's always going to be lacking a little bit. So it's not really emotion the way we think of emotion, but it's the feelings, the feelings of the soul, not the opinions. The opinions are in the intellect, right? You have 3 elements of intellect and 7 elements of emotion, midot. He also then says in chapter 3 that besides for those 10 sefirot, or those 10 midot, we call them the 10 kochot hanefesh, the 10 powers of the soul, there are also 3 garments. The garments are thought, speech, and action. The reason they're called garments is because they are true to the soul, but they're not part of the soul. They're the expressions of the soul, the modes of expression. So the soul has its 3 intellectual faculties and its 7 emotional faculties. And in addition, it also has 3 modes of expression, which are called the garments. They're called garments because they can be interchanged, they can be swapped out. They're not essential to the soul. So for example, I am able to think in my mind a thought that isn't true, that I know to not be true. I can think 3 + 3 is 12. I can think that, and I don't have to believe it. I can't believe it. You can't convince me that 3 + 3 is 12. My soul, my intellect won't accept it. But to think it, just the act of thinking, I can do that. I can certainly say it. I can certainly write it. So thought, speech, and action are not essential to the soul, and therefore they can easily be changed. Just like you can put on a uniform that doesn't match who you really are. You can wear clothing that don't match your opinions and your personality. The same is true with the soul. The soul can function and can behave, can express itself in a way that isn't true to what's going on the inside. So chapters 1, 2, and 3, we have the godly soul has 10 essential attributes, 10 soul powers, and 3 garments. Then he says, in addition to the fact that the soul has 3 garments, which would seem to suggest that the garments are kind of a lesser level of importance, or not so special like the actual feelings and actual opinions of the soul. Now, the Rebbe explains that nevertheless, those garments of the soul have a certain advantage over the attributes of the soul, the essential soul powers, in that when you perform the will of Hashem, if you do a mitzvah or you speak words of Torah or you think words of Torah, any one of those three garments, if you're doing what Hashem wants, you're actually connecting to Hashem in a very profound way, in a way that cannot happen through your opinions or your intellect, because your opinions and your intellect are limited to the extent that your individual, your personal intellect can reach. So how much of the divine can you actually grasp? A tiny, tiny little amount. But if God invests himself in a particular mitzvah, God says, I really want you to put on tefillin, I want you to eat kosher, I want you to keep Shabbos, I want whatever, and you actually do those things, you are living the will of Hashem. That's a tremendous connection. In fact, it's a far greater connection than the connection you can have through thinking your way into a relationship. An even greater connection to God is through studying Torah. When you study Torah and you grasp the concepts that God tells us, in other words, you're grasping divine intellect, divine wisdom, now you've just created a bond with God that's like, Dr. Rebbe describes it as a connection that has no parallel in all of existence. When you think of an idea and you struggle with it and you comprehend it fully, that process and the product of that process is a oneness that's extraordinary. Because you put your mind into the idea deeply till you finally come to understand it, and then when you finally understand it, your mind envelops the thought. So your mind captures the idea. So your mind is both surrounded by and surrounds the idea, which he talked about at length in chapter 4 and 5. And then chapter 6, he says, everything that we just said about the godly soul is also true of the animal soul. The animal soul also has the 10 attributes, three intellectual attributes and 7 emotional attributes. And the soul also has the 3 garments. And the 3 garments of the animal soul are when you use your thought, your expression, your garment of thought or speech or action to do something that God does not want, or to do something that's purely self-centered. When you use the animal soul to power, to facilitate your selfish needs, deeds, actions, thoughts, conversation, then that is that's the 3 garments of the animal soul. Now, just like he explained the benefit of using the godly soul for godly purposes, he then goes on to explain what the problem is with using the animal soul for animalistic purposes, right? So we were talking about how there are different levels of unholiness, of kilipa. There's the kind of unholiness that is absolutely unholy, has no redeeming value. And then there's the kind of kilipa that's kind of an incomplete unholiness, meaning there's a little bit of holiness there that you can extract from the physical and bring it back into godliness. For example, the example we use most is eating. If you eat a food with the intention of the energy that you get from that food would be used for doing something holy, then an otherwise mundane act becomes somewhat holy, right? So you have a piece of food, a meat hamantaschen, and you're definitely going to enjoy it. So if you eat it just because it's delicious, then you're taking something that is basically mundane and neutral, and you're dragging it down with you into the pure unholiness, which is just the self-serving human animal. And that's the shalosh klipot hatmeot, the utter evil, so to speak, the unholiness. Whereas if you do the same act, but you do it because with that energy you'll be able to perform a mitzvah, or you'll be more enthusiastic and happier when you study Torah or whatever it is, your mind is more open to because you're enjoying a good meal, then the otherwise mundane food that you're eating becomes holy, is elevated into holiness. Now, if you ate it for the wrong reason, if you ate it just to for survival, there was no holy thought, but there was no nefarious intention, then it remains neutral until you do something holy. What if you actually had the wrong thoughts? You just it looks delicious and I want delicious food. Then, like I said, it descends into unholiness. The three unholy klipot, and can be elevated out of the kalipa when you correct it, when you eat for the right reason and you have the right intentions and you do mitzvahs with the energy you get, then you're redeeming that which you forced down into the unholiness. However, that's only if the food was kosher. If the food was forbidden, then there's no way to redeem that, because by definition, forbidden in Hebrew is asur. And asur, as we learned, means it's bound, it's tied up. Bound means it's whatever little bit of holiness happens to be available in that thing is so deeply buried under the physicality of it that it completely blocks out the godliness, and the godliness is not available, the holiness is not available to be elevated. Which is why the word in Hebrew, in Torah language, for forbidden is asur. That's why that's the word. Because the reason the thing is forbidden is because it's not available to your elevating. The only reason we eat anything ever is because God designed the system in which we elevate the physical through our mitzvahs. Why else would we rip a piece off of a tree and eat it? Why else would we kill an animal and eat it? If not because somehow we're including that part of nature in our mitzvah. But you can only include that part of nature in your mitzvah if the spark of holiness, if the spark of the divine in it is available to be included in your mitzvah. So God clues us in on which physical things in the world are available to elevation and which are not, by telling us in the Torah what's kosher and what's not. So food that is kosher is available. Mutar means unbound. Mutar means permissible. So permissible, mutar, means unbound, which means if you do a mitzvah with this thing, you will be elevating the holiness, the spark of the divine that is in this thing. Forbidden means no matter how much mitzvah you do with it, it's not coming up. It's not going anywhere. So what if you have a meal and you intend all the right intentions? I'm going to eat this meal in order to take the energy, and with this energy I'm going to do a mitzvah, and then you actually have the right thoughts and do the right thing, and you go do the mitzvah, and then you find out that the food that you ate wasn't kosher. The mistake, purely mistake. Doesn't change anything. The fact is that the unholiness in it is trapped. The holiness in it is trapped in the unholiness, and you can't elevate it. Which means there's no way to turn that into a good thing. It's good that you did a mitzvah, but the energy that you got from that unkosher food will never become part of a mitzvah. With the exception of, he says, the exception is if you can do the kind of teshuvah that is so great. It's referred to as tshuva me'ahava rabbah, tshuva from tshuva is normally translated as repentance, but it's not really repentance. It means to return to Hashem. If you return to Hashem out of an insatiable appetite for closeness to God, you suddenly feel your distance and you want desperately to be close to God. You're not looking to spare yourself from going to hell. You're not looking to feel better about yourself and assuage your guilt. You just want closeness to God, and that's really what's driving your desire. Then that can undo the effect of the sin that's committed. The spark of the holiness that is forced into the three unholy kalipas but that's a tough thing to do, and we'll learn about that later in Tanya. So essentially, the difference between when something is exile, when a spark of holiness that is in a kosher food is exiled, so to speak, into unholiness, versus that which is really it is itself the three unholy klipas, is that the three unholy klipas you can't correct, whereas the other klipa you can. Bottom line is that the world is made up of holy, neutral, and unholy. Holy is, of course, what we think of it as. It's holy, it's good, it's wonderful, we like that. Unholy is exactly what we think of it as. It's unholy, stay away, don't go there. And neutral is what matters. That's what we're working on. That's where our efforts lie, where our efforts should lie. We're working on taking as much of the neutral and bring it up into the holiness instead of down into the unholiness.
So when something is on a natural stage, and let's say you eat kosher food without the right intention, right? Just eat it.
Yeah.
Not even for the intention of being of it's delicious, just because I'm hungry and I do it naturally. It's, how do you say avera? It's
Transgression?
Is it like avera?
No.
Okay. So it's just natural, not here, not there. So basically it's all about the intention, but with the right rules.
Right. Even eating just because you enjoy it, just for the pleasure, is also not a transgression, but it is an unholy act. So in other words, you don't have to be sinning in order to be causing a spiritual harm in the world. You can eat purely for the pleasure of it, because bamba is delicious and I like it, especially with the chocolate filling. And what's not to enjoy?
Yeah.
You say, yeah, but you're not even hungry. Why are you eating it? Well, I like it.
Yeah.
Just for the pleasure. If you're eating just for the pleasure, it's not a sin. You can eat as much as you want. You haven't transgressed any sin, but you're a glutton. And you take all of that potential holiness in the world and you're making it unholy by making it all about you.
And the pleasure
Because-
itself is not enough.
What do you mean?
I mean, if we know we have a godly soul only
The godly
enjoy-
soul has no interest in bamba. It's disappointing to hear, but it's true.
I see.
Now, the point is this. What is, remember he talked about, what is unholiness? What is kalipa? It's called, he also refers to it as the sitra achara, the other side. Why is it called the other side? Because by definition, what makes something unholy is that it's not holy. Holy means focused on God, God-centered, it's all about God. God is the creator, God creates everything for his purpose. It's supposed to be about him. If it's not about him, it's unholy. So if you do something purely for your own pleasure, that's unholy. Even if it's not sinful, it's unholy.
Okay.
So if you eat something that is permissible, but you eat it for all purely for the sake of the pleasure, then you're being another animal, and you're taking all of the energy that you're getting from that, and you're dragging it down into an animalistic state of being. And not only animalistic, but lower than animalistic, because animals don't do that. Animals don't engage in pure pleasure. Animals do purposeful things.
Yeah.
Animals do what they're trained to do, what they're programmed to do.
But no, there are also the things just because it's fun, even if it's forbidden.
But it's their program, saying an animal won't eat when it's not hungry anymore.
It is. You go to the field, you see cows eating all day long.
Because they're that hungry.
But now you know how many tons of
What?
grass they need.
So I want to get into the science of animals.
Yeah, there are
But
dogs
the
that will
point
eat
is-
as much as they have. If I give my dog a dry food, she will let it be. If I give her fresh salmon,
So that's an unhealthy dog.
it's a very picky one.
Okay. Anyway, I don't want to get
Yeah,
bogged
but-
down in discussing
Yeah.
different kinds of dogs. My point is that an animal doesn't sin.
Okay.
Animals don't sin.
Okay.
Animals don't break the
They
rules.
don't have the.
Animals do what they're,
Isn't there a mitzvah where you have to feed the, if you have an animal around you, you have to feed the dog first? before
You must feed
Yeah.
them, first,
Yeah.
yes.
anything that's dependent on you, you have to take care of before you take care of yourself. Why? Because you're not supposed to be self-centered.
It's such a big
That's the
word.
whole point of Tanya, is we're trying to get out of ourselves. So unholiness, to get back on track, unholiness means that which is not centered on God, that which is not focused on God. It's supposed to be focused on God, and if it's focused on you, it's unholy. So here's a question. The Alter Rebbe said that our souls come from which kalipa?
No.
The purely unholy klipa, or the slightly holy klipa? The
No,
klipat
the-
noga. The answer is from klipat noga, right? There is holiness in our animal soul. If my soul is from klipat noga, then what business do I have wanting something that's from shalosh klipot atmeot? The pure unholiness. I have no interest in the pure unholiness if my soul is from. My soul has no connection to pure unholiness. So why would I ever want something that's forbidden?
Why then?
Because you have another soul.
No, we're talking about the
No, we're
nefesh
talking about
habahamit.
animals.
Talking about the animal soul. The animal soul is from klipat noga, not from shalosh klipot atmeot. So how is it possible that I want something, that I have a desire for something that's less holy than my soul itself? How does the soul want something less holy? The answer is because I introduced that. I did that to myself. When I eat something purely for the pleasure of it, that's shalosh klipot hatmeot, desire. I want the food. Why? It's permissible and it's enjoyable, so I want it. I'm sorry, that's klipat noga. That's a permissible desire. But if I do that and I eat it just for me, I drag it down into utter unholiness because it's completely ignoring the existence of God. Now I've just introduced into myself the pure unholiness, the shalosh klipot atmeot. Now that I've introduced into myself the shalosh klipot atmeot, suddenly I start to have desires of shalosh klipot atmeot. I want maybe I should have some non-kosher food too, because if this is delicious, maybe that stuff is delicious too. I should have some of that. So the fact that we have a desire for something that's forbidden is because of the condition that we've created in ourselves, or that collectively we've created in ourselves, but naturally it's foreign to us. If you think about it, we should have absolutely no desire for anything that's forbidden. Anything that God forbids, we should have no desire for it, naturally, organically. When we do have a desire for it, we should recognize that that's not natural to us. That's a foreign desire. Anyway, so we know what the effect of the godly soul is, right? It elevates, it makes things holy, it serves God, it wants the good, it uses the garments of the soul, which is the thought, speech, and action that the body can engage in to serve Hashem. We know what the animal soul does. It wants self promotion. It wants to do what it wants. It wants to take care of itself. It wants to feel good. So it uses the thought, speech, and action, which is the potential of the body. It uses it as its garments. So whenever I'm doing a mitzvah, my thoughts and my speech and my action are in clothing, have become the garments to the godly soul. When I do things that I should not do, my thought, speech, and action are now garments to the animal soul. The effects of which we talked about: godly soul using the garments makes the world around me better, makes my soul, it rises to a higher level of holiness. When I use those same garments to serve my animal soul, the effect is I not only drag myself down, but I drag whatever physical elements of the world I used in that behavior down with me into the unholiness, and I have to try to retrieve that by doing teshuvah, whatever. So we know what the souls are. We know what they comprise. We know what they're made up of. They're the intellectual faculties, the emotional faculties, the garments. We know what they do. We know what their effect is. Now we're up to chapter 9. What was that? 8 chapters and how long? You didn't time it?
Yeah.
So chapter 9 is really actually, this is, if you know, for those of you that are here for the first time, this is a really good time to jump on board, because this is really where the subject of Tanya really starts. In a way, in a sense, the last 8 chapters were an introduction. We're laying the groundwork. It was explaining to us what we're dealing with. But now he's going to get into, okay, so what?
Now we're gonna talk business.
Now we're going to talk business. This is where the rubber hits the road. Tachlis. And the tachlis is that you would think that these 2 souls, each one does its thing. And what's the problem? No, the animal soul wants what it wants. The godly soul wants what it wants. Mind their own business and go about their lives, and you live. But it's not the way. That's not the way it happens, because each one of them wants all of the expression, all of the thought, speech, and action to be devoted to it. That's where the challenge comes up. And that's going to explain to us all of our inner conflicts. Yeah, it explains all of it. So here we go. Vehine. The first several lines of it is a little bit we'll get into it. The seat of the animal soul in the body is in the heart. If you wanted to put a pin drop, drop a pin like on the map. You want to drop a pin somewhere in you where you could locate the home, the seat of the animal soul, that would be in the heart. The chalal hasmali, in the left cavity. How exactly this relates to what we know of physiologically, I don't think it matters, but there must be some correlation. But there's the left part of the heart and the right part of the heart. The left part of the heart, the Alter Rebbe says, Shehub Mole Dam. That is, the left part of the heart is full of blood, which means that's where the blood originates. Uksiv ki Adam hu nefesh, like it says, the blood, not only like it said, and as it says, the blood is the life force of the person. And therefore, kol hataivos v'espidus v'kas v'demei and hein belev. That's why your desires, your bodily desires, and your hispirus is your boasting, your whatever, anything like that, and your anger and anything similar to these are all rooted in the heart. Umehalev hemispashtes b'chol haguf. From the heart they expand, they spread out to the rest of the body. And they also ascend into the mind, which is in the head, to think, to use the mind, to think about my desires and my boasting and my anger and whatever other nasty character traits I happen to have. And not only to think about them, but to actually use my intellect to serve them. So when I get angry, I don't just get angry and then I feel angry in my mind also. I use my mind to further my anger, to justify it and to sharpen it and to
Or what's a ventricle?
You have to ask a doctor.
Heart.
It's a chamber in the heart, yeah.
Okay.
A cavity, a heart cavity, ventricle, yeah. Just like blood is sourced in the heart, and from the heart it spreads to all the limbs of the body, and it also goes up to the head. That the animal soul goes with it. The negativity goes with it, travels with the blood into the rest of the body and also into the head and into the mind and to the intellect, as we were saying before. However, the place, the seat, the place of the dwelling place of the godly soul, that's in the mind. So the godly soul starts in the mind, the animal soul starts in the heart. The godly soul starts in the mind, umisham, and from there, mispashetes l'chol evorim, it spreads out to all the limbs of the body, v'gam belev, and also into the heart. B'cholol hayemani, in the right side of the heart, she'ein b'idam, which does not have blood. It doesn't mean there's no blood on the right side of the heart. It means that the blood on the right side of the heart came from the left side. As it says in Kohelet, in Ecclesiastes, Lev Chacham, the heart of a wise person is to his right. This means, Vehi, Avas Hashem Krish Beishal Heves Masal Misla Heves, when the heart is used to have a flaming, burning love for God, like a raging flame, Belev Maskilim, Hamevinim Umesboinim, Bedaitam Asher B'moicham, in the minds of those who understand and use their intellect to pursue understanding of the greatness of God, they end up with a burning desire and love for Hashem. They think about they think about those things, those thoughts that awaken the love in them, and that's why and also simchas levav, the joy of the heart, b'spaidos Hashem v'hadar go'inoi, not thinking about what makes me special, but thinking about what makes God special. That's part of the awesomeness of using the heart for the right reason. Kasher Einei HaChacham Asher B'Roishoi, when the mind of the wise person, which is in his head, the Moya Chachmasi B'Nasai, meaning not your physical eyes, but when your mind's eye can see, Mistaklim B'Yikara D'Malka V'Tiferes Gidulosai, when your mind's eye looks at the brilliance and the beauty of God, just like when you look at a beautiful painting, you feel good. When you think about the magnificence of God and His creation, that also makes you feel good. And that's all happening in the heart. And that greatness, that the magnificence of God is Adein Cheker, beyond our ability to plumb the depths of that amazing, the greatness. Ve'ein sof v'tachlis, it's endless, as is explained elsewhere. The same is true with all the other attributes. V'chein sha'ar midos kedosha shebalev. Also the other holy attributes that are in the heart, they come from the intellect and the mind. Which means the function of the animal soul is it starts in the heart and it makes its way into the mind. The nature of the godly soul is it starts in the mind and makes its way to the heart, which means a holy thought, a holy feeling is it derives from and it's inspired by it's developed by the mind. Unholy thoughts are developed in the heart. In other words, holiness starts in the mind. It tells the heart what to feel. Unholiness starts in the heart and tells the brain what to think.
The sciencey comment / question. So like the amygdala, right? It's like our animal brain. And it's the part of the brain that a lot of psychologists and medical people consider as being that like more unholy side, like our instincts, our desires. So where does that play into this?
Well, I'm no expert, but it sounds like that's the important part of the animal soul. Mm-hmm. By the way, I'm glad you brought that up because it's important to note that the animal soul is not a bad thing.
It's what it makes us live.
Yeah, it's how we live. If you didn't have fight or flight instinct, you'd be dead. Mm-hmm. So it's not a bad thing that you have an animal soul. And King Solomon says in the Torah, with the might of an animal, you get a greater yield when you plow a field. And you think King Solomon, the wisest of all men, has to tell me that if I use an ox to plow my field, I get a greater yield than if I plow it myself? Like, thanks. Anything else? Anything wiser than that, Mr. Wisest Man of all time? The answer is, what he's saying is, don't kill off your animal, because you can accomplish a lot more, even in holy matters, if you use the strength of the animal. You just have to make sure it's got a nice, big, strong yoke on its neck so that it does what you want, not the other way around. But it has tremendous power. So the animal is important, the animal soul. It's a very important thing. When it runs amok, in a china shop, that's a bad thing. But the animal soul is not a bad thing. It's just waiting to be elevated, like the rest of creation.
Also, kind of, the limbic system is the primitive part of the brain. So if anything, it kind of backs it up, right? Because it evolved. Well, the limbic system, which is the emotional mind, is more primitive. And then you have the brain that has more cognitive, right?
So the question is, when the brain thinks an emotional thought, Did the brain decide that this was a good thought to think, or did the heart tell the mind what to think?
Right.
That's what we're getting at. That's what the Alter Rebbe talks about a lot. And this concept, which the Alter Rebbe will discuss at length in Tanya, is the concept of moach shalit al halev. The mind is supposed to control the heart, not the other way around. A child, by
Emotions, doesn't the mind kind of control how you feel?
should.
Would be like a loop.
Yeah, when it starts in the heart and it's a loop and the mind helps the heart develop the emotions it wants, that's childish. That's animal.
So it's like emotions versus logic, right? It's like you have like a logical mind and an intellectual way of thinking, and then there's the more like emotional way of thinking that's not backed by like intellectual basis.
It's more
Yeah.
instinctual.
But look,
Like
you think
intuitive or something like
think of
that.
it this way. Everybody in the world says, why do you get married? You get married for
Taxes.
love, taxes, right? That's smart. Everybody gets married for love. Love will keep us together, right? And what's the divorce rate?
70%.
50 to 70%. Maybe we should try finding something else to get married for. So essentially what getting married for love means is, if I love you, then you're important to me. That is purely animalistic, animal soul thinking. That is the height of narcissism. Instead of thinking, I love you, therefore you're important, you should think, you're important. I should probably love you. Doesn't that make more sense? So the godly soul says, my mind is telling me that this is an important person. I should get my heart in line with this idea because this is where it's at. The animal soul says, oh, I feel good around here. I better get my mind in line with my feelings so that I can. That's not how it's supposed to work. And it gets us in trouble.
So when like blind dates, when religious people arrange shidduch, then you first make sure that the interest is common. So we both want the same things. We came from similar families that will go. So then, and only then we'll see if we love each other or not. Probably we will have to because
No, we won't see if we love each other. You know when we know if we'll love each other? At our 50th wedding anniversary, we'll look back and say, you know what? I think that somewhere along the line we fell in love.
yeah. But
it's not blind date. It's you're going on a date to see if this person is good enough and worthy enough for you to devote your life to for the rest of your life. Devote yourself to for the rest of your life. Can I get along with this person? It's not blind. I mean, it's the shidduch system is the least blind dating system because you know everything about the person before you go out with them, except can I get along with them? So a shidduch means all the research has been done. You know everything there is to know. You're just going out to see if you can get along and if you're attracted. That's not blind. That's like the polar opposite of a blind date.
Well, what about the literal blindness? Like, would Netflix Love is Blind qualify for this? Because they get to know each other really well. And then sometimes it works out.
So what you're saying is actually profound because,
Okay. No.
again, so we're running down these rabbit holes, which we love to do. But why is it that the creator, which ostensibly is the most real thing, is invisible while his creation is visible? If he is more real than anything he created, shouldn't he be visible more so than the creation? Why is he invisible and we are visible? It's because he wants it that way. He wants to be invisible. Why?
he's humble.
Humble, but also because if we saw him, we would be so amazed by what we see that our appetite for getting to know him would be satisfied by what our eyes can behold. And we would not have any desire or appetite to get to know him any deeper. So he remains invisible so that you have to know him deeply. That's the real meaning of tzniut, of modesty between men and women or between husband and wife. That's really the meaning of tzniut, is the less your eyes take in, the more your mind and heart are going to want. The more your eyes take in, the less your mind and heart are engaged because you're just basking in the pleasure of what your eyes are. So blind people will definitely have deeper relationships. I don't think that there's any question there. I have to take a little station break for a little Yaakov Moshe, Sarah, you would say? I forgot to hook up a charger here, and the my phone battery is gonna die soon. So can't we bring a charger with that extension cord? Whatever. Can't skip it in. An iPhone charger with an extension cord. So. If you use your mind to think about godliness and that produces the pleasure in your heart, then that's awesome. That's the way it's meant to be, right? Ach hineksiv. But after all, it does. You remember in the Torah, there's a story of Jacob and Isaac. Isaac's two sons, Jacob and Esau, Yaakov and Esav. When our matriarch Rivka was pregnant with her twins, she didn't know what was going on. She didn't know that she had twins. She went to ask the prophet of the time, "What's going on? Why do I feel conflict within me?" And she was told, there are two nations within you, and they will be at constant war with each other. Le'om mil'om ye'ematz. One will always be struggling with the other. One nation fighting against another nation. So he says, Ach hineksiv, it says in the Torah, Le'om mil'om ye'ematz. The two will always fight with each other. Ki haguf nikra ir katana. This is where it's at. If you started learning Tanya right here, you would understand it all. Almost. The body is a small city. This is the visual that you're supposed to have. Ki haguf nikra ir katana. The body is a small city. And just like when you have two kings battling over a single city, each one wants to conquer it and to rule over it. The hainu this means. What does it mean to rule over it? It means, thank you, Yaakov Moshe. It means lahanhig yoshveha kiritzaynai, to control and have the inhabitants live according to your will. And they should follow his pronouncements, whatever it is that he decrees upon them. The same is true with the two souls. The godly soul and the animal soul, the unholy animal soul, they are at constant war with one another. Over the body. The godly soul, its desire and its will is it wants to be the sole ruler over the body and controller of the body. And the godly soul wants all the limbs of the body to be completely subservient to its will, to the godly soul's will, and completely transparent and subservient to the godly soul. And to be like a chariot to it, to be a vehicle for the godly soul. Notice he just mentioned 3 levels of devotion. All the limbs, he says, all the limbs should be responsive to its proclamations. That's one level, which means you're doing what the godly soul wants, even if you're not feeling it. And then betelim etzla legamri means you also set aside your own opinions. You're completely transparent to it. And then there's the next level of merkavela, you're a vehicle to the godly soul, which means you don't even have an opinion. Ultimately, that's what the godly soul wants. The godly soul wants the body to be nothing more than a vehicle to godliness. So like you can have somebody who's helping you out, you can have somebody who is your servant, and you can have a vehicle, your car. The difference between your servant and your car is that your servant has his own opinions. Only he does what you want because you're the boss. The car doesn't have an opinion. Whatever you want, that's what it's there for. That is what it exists for. That's the meaning of a merkava. To say that something that you're a chariot to an idea, you're a vehicle to that idea, means you exist for the purpose of whatever it is that the rider wants. That's the idea. That's what the godly soul wants. The godly soul wants the person to be completely and totally subservient to God and to exist for no reason other than to serve God. That's pure godly. That's what the godly soul wants. V'yihiu levush le'eser b'chinaiseha v'gimel levusheha anal. And that all of you should be a garment to the 10 soul powers and the 3 soul attributes as mentioned before. Sheyislabshu kulam, they should all be enclosed be'evori aguf, in the all of those 10 attributes, and the 3 garments should all be enclosed in the limbs of your body. V'yihu haguf kulai mole mehem levadam, and your body should be filled with nothing but the attributes of the godly soul. And no stranger should ever pass through these borders. Right? Back to the analogy of the city. No strangers allowed. That's what the godly soul wants. The godly soul wants you to be completely 100% in the service of your creator. Dahainu, tlas moichin sheberosh yumimulaim mechabad shebenefesh alikis. The 3 elements of your human intellect should be filled completely with the 3 levels of the divine intellect. That's how God's wisdom and God's understanding. To think about His greatness, asher ad ein cheker ve'ein soif, which is completely endless. Ulahoylid mehen al yedei hadas hayira b'moichoy upachad Hashem b'liboy, and through this knowledge and through this understanding in your mind, you can develop and you can give birth to fear in your mind and trembling in your heart. V'avas Hashem ke'esh boyara b'liboy, and love of Hashem burning in your heart, k'dish b'shal heves, like flaming coals. Liyas nichsefa v'gam kolsa nafshay b'chasheka b'chafetzel adavka boy ba'ein sev baruchu. All these, he's describing this intensity that the godly soul wants to see in you and your love for God. You should be thirsting for God and want and desire nothing but Him, just to cleave to God, b'chol lev v'nefesh ma'od, with all your heart and with all your soul and all your might. Me'umka deliba b'shebachol alayimani, with from the depths of your heart and in the right side of your heart, obviously. Ad shetispashet gam lahoylid hasmoli l'chol hasmoli, until it can overflow and spread into the left side of the heart as well. La'akfaya l'sitra achra, to bend the unholiness, Yesoid Hamayim Aroim Shaba, with the source of the negativity in it. Shehi HaTaiva Shemeklipas Noiga, that's the desires of the unholiness. L'shanoisa, to change that, Ulahofcha, and to convert it completely, Mitenuga Elam Hazeh, La'avas Hashem, to completely convert the other side of your heart, the animal instinct in you, to convert it over to want that your animal soul can be taught to want God also. It doesn't naturally. Your godly soul naturally wants closeness to God. Your animal soul wants closeness to the sandwich. You can train your animal soul to want closeness to God. And that's what the godly soul wants. Like we say in the Shema, you say with all your heart. There are 2. The Hebrew word for with all your heart would be b'kol libcha. In the Torah, it's written with 2 letters, 2 bases, and the Talmud says that's to imply shnei yitzrecha, the 2 parts, the 2 inclinations in your heart. That's why it's a double heart. By the way, when it says, just a little footnote here, when it says yira b'moichay, the fear in your mind and trembling in your heart, there's fear and there is terror. I don't know what the word is. Pachad is, what's the difference between fear and very afraid? Yeah, I'm afraid and I'm very afraid. Yira and pachad?
Terrified.
Terrified, yeah. What's the difference? So Rashi says in Torah, yira means fear of that which is distant. Pachad is fear of that which is close. If you're looking across the other side of the jungle and you see the lion, you're afraid of the lion.
Yeah.
If the lion is right here in front of you, you're not afraid. You're terrified, right? That's pachad and yira. So yira is in the mind. You look and you see the lion. Oh wow, I'm in danger. My mind is telling me there's a problem. So that's fear in the mind. When my fight or flight kicks in, like we were talking about before, because the lion is right here, Now I'm terrified. So that's close. So in your mind, it's yira. In your heart, it's pachad.
So
It's like something that's expected. Like the ira, it's terrified, it's being afraid of something that's expected to happen, as opposed to is happening.
Right. In other words, it's something that your mind is telling you is a danger or is
Still,
yeah,
awesome.
like you're going and you know there's lions around, even though
right. So if
they're not.
it's very basically, if it's a fear that's generated by your mind, not by circumstances, then that's called yira.
so it's anxiety.
Terrifying to see a lion, even if it was far. I feel like I'd be pretty terrified.
Isn't another definition of Yira awe?
Yeah.
See that?
Yeah. Because it's basically the yira is when you understand the greatness, you feel smaller. Right.
That's different than like being afraid something's going to kill you, like a lion or something.
Right. The idea is that there is yira and pachad. In the awe for God, there's the same two levels. There's the basic yira, which is I understand God is great, and then there's the awesome awe when you really truly feel that closeness to God, and you feel like you don't belong here. What am I doing standing in the presence of God? I'm tiny and insignificant, and He's awesome. And v'hainu, this means sheyale. The Yavoy v'yagia, he should rise and arrive or come to and arrive at the Madrigas Avarabba, that level of tremendous love that we were talking about before. That's the love that can convert a sin into a virtue. That's how awesome that love is. The Chiba Yaseda, and this additional, this extra Chiba is again love. I don't know how else you would translate that.
It's like and love.
What? Is it affection?
Chiba, affection, okay.
Mimadregas,
Yeah, Mimadregas Ava Aza Krish Be'esh, from this love that is powerful like a flaming fire. V'hi anekras because of Ava B'tanugim. This is what is referred to in the Torah as Ava B'tanugim. It's in the Song of Songs, Shir HaShirim. There are different kinds of love. One is called Ava B'tanugim, means love with pleasure, or the love generated by pleasure. The Alter will explain that more later in Tanya, when it gets into the nitty gritty of how love works and which kind of love we have naturally and what love we're supposed to generate and what love needs to be developed between us and Hashem. That great, tremendous love is called Ava B'tanugim. Lis'aneg al Hashem, to really find your pleasure in God. Me'ein olam haba, like as if you were already in heaven, where your pleasure is the pleasure of the divine. V'oineg hu b'moyach chachma v'seichel. The pleasure is in your mind and in your understand or your the wisdom in your intellect. Hamesanig b'haskolas Hashem b'yidiyasai, when you take pleasure in knowing God and understanding God and comprehending God to whatever extent you can, kifi asaga sichle v'chamasai, to the extent that your particular intellect is able. Vehu b'chai hamayim v'zera or zerua shebekdushas nefesh alikis. This is mystical concepts. Water is often synonymous with light. In fact, if you look, there are some places in Torah where rain is referred to as light. There's a reason for that. There's a connection. But the point is that that Ava B'tanugim, that love that's so great that it is the pleasure, water is referred to as the element that produces pleasure. Water produces all kinds of pleasure. And everything good and delicious that grows from the ground, that's light. In the holiness of the godly soul, hamehapeches letoiv, which converts to good, as bechinas hamayim shebenefesh habahamis, it can convert to good all of that water element of the animal soul. Shemehem bo taivas tanug elam hazed mitchila, because originally the water element, this aspect of the animal soul, was the source of all of the negative desires and pleasures of this world, your physical, bodily, worldly pleasures. That's how it was, but the godly soul can change that. As it says in the Kabbalah, the evil is converted to be pure goodness, just like the Yetzer Tov. You have the animal inclination in you, the animal instinct in you, the evil inclination, and you have the good inclination. The evil inclination can be converted entirely into into a Yetzer Tov. Remember, this is all he's describing the desire of the godly soul and to what extent the godly soul wants to rule over the small city, which is the person, right? How do you do that? How do you change a Yetzer Hara into a Yetzer Tov? How do you change a nasty instinct into a positive instinct? The answer is B'hasir habagodim hatzoyim imenu, to simply remove the soiled garments that it's wearing. Shehem tanugei olam hazeh shemulubash behem. They are the pleasures of the physical world that enclose the soul, or that instinct, which means even the animal soul, even the Yetzer Hara, in truth, it wants good things. It doesn't want bad. It wants good, only because of the condition into which it's created, which means it's created into a world of worldly bodily pleasures. It messes it up. But that's not what's true to it. What's true to it is it wants what God wants. It wants what its creator wants, like everything. Everything wants what its creator wants. The same with all the feelings of the heart. All of the branches of the love and fear. In other words, love and fear are the two primary emotions. And all of our emotions are a branch. Any given emotion is an offshoot of either love or fear, a desire for closeness or a desire for distance. The kol koyach hadibur shebapeh, and also the ability to speak in your mouth, machshava shebemayach, are the thought in your minds. Yiu mimuloyim min levushe hamachshava v'hadibur shal nefesh alikis levada. They should all be filled with the garments of the godly soul alone. Shehein machshavas Hashem b'terasa. That's the thoughts of God and His Torah. Li'esichose kol hayoyim le'posek b'mirgirsa. To be the kind of person who never stops speaking words of Torah. In this is what the godly soul. This is what your godly soul wants. The koyach hamayse shebiyada v'shara machevarav. Same is true with any other mode of expression. Your action, your speech, your thoughts. Yeh b'maise hamitzvos levad. They should all be only about mitzvahs and nothing else. Shehu levush hashlish shal nefesh alikis. The action is all about. The action is the third garment. Should be entirely subservient to the godly soul and to God. So your thoughts should be all about God. Your speech should be all about God. Your actions should be all about God. That's what the godly soul wants, and that's the potential of the animal soul. It has that same potential. But the desires of the animal soul are the exact opposite. It wants the pleasures of the human. That it should conquer it and take control. Like the famous parable of the prostitute, which you can find in the Zohar. I was hoping you wouldn't ask.
It's in the bottom right here.
Yeah.
It is?
So the Zohar says as follows. If everything is created by God, then how can anything rebel against God? It doesn't make sense. So the Zohar says, you're right, it doesn't make sense. And in fact, it's not that way. And the analogy that the Zohar gives is you have a king who's trying to test the virtue of his son. His son is going to become the next king. He wants to make sure that his son is up to the task. He wants the son to prove his own virtue, demonstrate his magnificence. So he hires a prostitute. One of the king's subjects, a devoted subject of the king, to tempt the son. What does this woman want? She is doing what the king asked her to do. She's going to tempt the son. What does she want? She's tempting the son to sin. Pardon. She's tempting the prince to sin. What does she want?
She wants the son to not take her.
She wants to fail. Right? She wants to fail. She wants the son to rise up to the challenge. So does she kind of not do her job completely? No, because that wouldn't prove the son's virtue. If you want to prove the prince's virtue, she has to turn up the charm and do her job as well as she possibly can so that he can resist the greatest kind of temptation. This is what the Zohar says. So the king hires this woman. She does everything she possibly can to get him to sin, all the while thinking, don't do it, don't do it, don't be an idiot. So she's trying her best to tempt him, and she's praying that she fail, that he succeed and pass the test. The Zohar says that is every single thing in the physical world. You walk by a non-kosher restaurant, you look in the window, you say, wow, that looks delicious. The pig with the apple in its mouth on that table is praying that you don't fall for it. It's the prostitute in the Zohar. That's exactly what it is. Every temptation in the world is doing its best to tempt you while praying that you don't fall for it. It's a brilliant analogy.
Yeah, but why? I never got this. I mean, like, why all the mind games? Like with Pharaoh, for instance, Pharaoh's going to let people go,
That was a hell of a mind game.
right? And then he wants to be better than he was before and let the people go. And then it says, no, God went in and said no. And I don't know, maybe it's so we get stronger because we wandered the desert for so long, or we want our freedom more. But I mean, it's so complicated. Like, why can't anything be simple?
Yeah, so well, first of all, because anything simple isn't worth doing. Anything simple isn't worth the time. What we're talking about doesn't really correlate well with the story of Pharaoh, because what happened with Pharaoh is there are two ways of looking at it. First of all, he had sinned so bad that God gave him a chance, gave him another chance, gave him another chance, gave him another chance, and then said, okay, your chances are over. Now you're going to get the whooping you deserve for all of it, and it's too late to back out. That's one way of looking at it.
What the killing of the firstborn, though, that didn't have to happen, right?
Yeah, it did.
Why?
Because of everything that they had done to the Jewish people over 200 years.
Yeah, but why do the babies have to suffer?
Who said they suffered? Who said dying is suffering?
Well, I don't know.
No, dying
Were they
isn't suffering.
idols, though? The firstborn was like an idol.
Yeah.
It's not-
Like, that's a good point.
Dying isn't suffering. Dying is a relief. It's the people who survive that suffer. We're not talking about painful death. We're talking about
But they're
So,
babies.
but who
though. They're
suffers though? If they take the oldest kids,
Well-
like who suffers? The parents.
One second, you have to really strip the emotion out of this if you're gonna. The fact is that the person who dies no longer suffers, right? Don't we say, oh, now he's in a better place, right? Don't we say that? Which I disagree with. But
Sometimes you are in a better
hold on,
place.
hold on.
It depends.
There's another way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is when the Torah says that God hardened Pharaoh's heart, it doesn't mean that he denied him the opportunity to do the right thing. What it means is that God removed the effect of the miracle so that Pharaoh could go back to making his own choice unaffected by the miracle.
Okay.
That's another way of looking at it. Anyway, but like I said, yeah, so there are all kinds of ways of looking at it. I mean, in Torah, you can find 70 answers to any good question.
So it's not that Hashem is just messing with us all.
No.
Because that's my issue. It's like,
Right.
I feel like I don't know.
Yeah, it's
all
not
mind games.
It's not mind games.
Okay.
It's challenges in order to demonstrate our true desire to be in a relationship with him. So, for example, you say, well, I'm not just going to follow all the rules, then I'm just a robot, right? But what is a robot? A robot is something that cannot do what it wants. It has no wants. It just does what it's told. But it's not a good description. A better description is, if you're a robot, that means that you're doing what you're programmed to do. If you're not a robot, that means that you can step outside your program and do what someone else needs you to do. So when God says, I know you want that ham sandwich, I want you to eat the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And you say, why would I do that? I'm not a robot. I'm going to eat the ham sandwich. No, that's the robot. The robot is the one that can't step out of its own program. So when God says, I want you to deny your own desire and do what I want, that's the ultimate challenge. Is it about me or is it about you? Are you just a robot like any other animal grazing in the field? You want what you want and you're going to do what you want and that's it? Or can you can you suspend your own desires long enough to please God? That's the big challenge. Can you make it about him? So the word we started way back at the beginning of the Tanya class, we were talked about the word olam, which means world. The Hebrew word for world means concealment. Everything in the created world conceals God. That's what it does. And our job is to remove the concealment. You ever hear the expression tikkun olam? What does tikkun olam mean? Everybody says tikkun olam means get the trash off the beaches and save the whales. Repair the world. That's not what tikkun olam means. Tikkun olam means fix the concealment. The concealment is blocking something really important. Fix it. Reveal the godliness in the concealment, in the world. There's a lot of godliness in this world. Reveal it. That's what we're supposed to do. That's the point of living. That's why we exist. To reveal godliness in the world. The world conceals it. Olam? Yeah. Olam, well, it's not a translation, but that's what tikkun olam is. If you understand the mystical,
Tikkun olam is fixing up the world.
tikkun olam means fix the world. But what does the world mean? World means he'elim, concealment, right? The word olam comes from ne'elam, he'elim, means concealment.
And also tikkun is more like correction.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Because it means that there was something that was done that needs to be repaired.
So why are we here? We're here to correct the concealment. How do you correct the concealment? By recognizing that all of the things in the world that try to present themselves as their own thing, not there to serve God's purpose, but to be created beings for themselves. Like, for example, me. Peel back the layers and reveal what's really going on. What's really going on is all of my desires are just the concealment. That's just the distraction. The truth is, I exist to serve my creator. Why else would I be here? Think about, you want to be purely logical? Just pure logical without any faith involved? Yeah? If I am created by a creator, what is my purpose? It has to, by logical, rational reasoning, my purpose has to be a need of the creator. How does it make any sense to say I was created to serve my own needs? Before I was created, I didn't have any needs. So why was I created? Because whoever created me needs me for something. Yeah. So somehow we're led to believe that we exist to serve our own desires, our own needs, and eat, drink, for tomorrow you will die. It's a logical absurdity. Forget the fact that it's not holy, and logically it doesn't make sense. How could it be that I exist to serve myself? I didn't create myself. Somebody else made me. Why? Stands to reason, because he needs me. What does he need me for? To make me happy? He needs me to make me happy. It doesn't make any sense. It's a logical absurdity. I exist to serve the vast eternal plan, to quote the Fiddler on the Roof. All great Jewish wisdom comes. So that's what he's saying here in this chapter. Every time you feel any kind of internal conflict, I want it, but I know I don't want it. Why do I want something I know I don't want? The answer is, think of that analogy in the Zohar. It's doing its job. You should do your job. Somebody said, a couple of great stories, but the chassid who was sent off to the gulag. One of the elder chassidim of the previous Mendel Futterfass, brilliant guy and just a tremendous teacher, and he goes to the gulag. The Russians send him off to the gulag for 12 years for opening Jewish day schools and mikvahs and stuff.
True story?
True story.
Oh.
No, that part of the story happened 1,000 times.
Yeah, they went to Siberia.
So he says he gets to Siberia and he wakes up the first morning in Siberia and he thinks to himself, now I understand what it means when it says that the Yetzer Hara is a fool. In Tanya, it talks about that the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, is a fool. He says, now I understand why. I wake up in the morning and my first thought is, go back to sleep. But the sun comes up, I have to go daven. Go back to sleep. He says, now I thought to myself, wow, the evil inclination really is an idiot. I was sent to Siberia because I had no choice. They locked me up, they put me in chains, they took me to Siberia. Why did my evil inclination come with me to this godforsaken frozen tundra? That was purely by choice. He's an idiot. But more practically, you wake up in the morning and your first thought is not get up and do your morning davening. Your first thought is, I can go back to sleep for another 5 minutes. Think about what's happening. What's happening is the evil inclination in you wakes up like that. And it's at its post. It's doing its job immediately. The second you open your eyes, it's already hard at work. It's all about me. It's about, let me do what feels best for me. What you should think when that your first selfish thought in the morning, your first counter thought should be, wow, you're up early. I guess if you're doing your job so diligently, I should probably do mine just as diligently. That's a good way to respond to that thought. When you have your first negative thought in the morning, you think to yourself, wow, that's devotion. My negative side is pretty devoted to the job, to the task. I guess my positive side should be just as devoted. I'm gonna get up and do what I got to do. Because that's all it is. That's all it's there for. It's just a distraction to see if you're really going to be devoted to holiness and goodness and godliness. Or are you going to get distracted by your petty little human needs and whims? So that is the beginning of the real crux of Tanya.
Interesting.
Yeah.